Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I just want to compliment the League of Women Voters. If there ever was a time for the need for civil discourse, this is it. And I'm grateful for all the things that you do in our community. Jan, I've never gotten to meet you, and I've heard so many wonderful things about your work. Jan is someone who really set up the libraries to, I think, be what they're going to be. And I really do appreciate civil servants that work so hard on our behalf. Today I wanted to talk about 21st century libraries. Oh, I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce Heather. Heather's our branch manager for Aptos. You'll see that smiling face behind the desk. As I talk to people about public libraries, I actually like to tell a story because I believe profoundly in the transformational nature of a public library, or really any library. And so I have a story, and I find that when I talk to people, other people have stories. So I want you to think about if you have a story. In the 4th grade, I was a reluctant reader. I wasn't doing well in school. And I had this wonderful librarian by the name of Mrs. Andrews in my elementary school. And she said, you know, Susan, you're so smart. My goal for you is to read, I want you to read this entire wall in the library by the time you graduate from elementary school in the 6th grade. And I thought that was just an amazing thing that she would ask me to do that, but I decided to try it. And by the end of the 6th grade, I had read this entire wall. Wow. And in some ways, it was the biggest accomplishment of my life. But I would also say that it fundamentally changed who I was. It made me a good reader. And it really changed my perspective about what I could be and what I could do. And so I'm just curious, is there anyone in the audience? I love to ask people if they have a library story. It's usually from childhood. And to be honest, I've heard really bad stories where like the nasty librarian told someone they couldn't read these things so that they did. Does anyone have a story like that? Oh, don't be shy. This is the League of Women Voters. Oh, tell me your story.
And I didn't think of it until you mentioned it. Hi. I'm going to go over here. My name's Hyla Michelson. My mother came at age 3 to the United States. And at age 7, this is her story, at age 7, the teacher told them about the library. And this was in the Bronx in New York. And she tells me that she will run in and grab any book and run out because she didn't know she could linger. She didn't know that she could look for what she might want, that this was such a privilege and there was this beautiful space. So when I grew up, which was in Mount Vernon, New York, we had a Carnegie Library, and oh, was it beautiful. And walking up these marble steps to where the children's section was, I just felt so privileged. We were not refugees at that point. We were sort of assimilated in the U.S. But there was a librarian there who saw my mother looking kind of nervous. And she went over and talked to her about how this could be, I don't think she used the word transformative, but that it was. My mother was a great reader, and after that experience, she came to use the library a great deal. And then I moved to Santa Cruz, or no, there were many other moves in between. But when I moved to Santa Cruz, and I was telling the story earlier, the new library was built, and somebody can tell me what year that was?
68.
It's 1968. I've been here 3 years. And the library isn't open yet, but there's an article in the Sentinel about the library, and that the Board of Supervisors went in to take a look, and there was carpeting on the floor. And they were very upset about that. How expensive is that? How unnecessary. And one of them said, Santa Cruz ain't up to this. Well, I think we were very we proved that we were very up to having a really lovely looking library.
So,
And most of you will probably remember that.
I just want you to know that we didn't talk before, but you had said exactly what I wanted you to say. And it has everything to do with how libraries are transforming. I think if you think of libraries as a depository of books, then we're changing a lot. But if you think of the library as a learning space where people go to get their questions answered and to figure out their information needs, then libraries aren't actually changing very much. The tool's changing. In the 1950s, the book became the focus of how we learn because it was a cheap technology that could serve a lot of people. And now, you know, the cheap technology is digital. So the interesting thing I wanted to say about your story is if you look at Santa Cruz Public Libraries are going to have their 150th anniversary next year. They have been around a long time. And those early libraries were very much about helping immigrants integrate and become accustomed to the society to which they were joining. And it wasn't really till the 50s that we got super focused on reading, okay? I still want to say reading is magnificent. Reading is important, but learning is important as well. So there's some kind of shifts happening. The focus from reading to learning, the focus from digital, or books to digital. And interestingly, as we look at learning, there's a real change, and we have some teachers in the audience, from sort of solo learning. You know, I was the 50s, 60s kid where our homework assignments were all by ourselves, and you were judged by your individual output. Well, it's interesting because education's completely changed, and now all the assignments are group activities, recognizing that the workforce really is looking at collaborative learning as the model. And so as we look at those shifts, we also have to shift what the library's doing. My dad knows. So I wanted to unpack this a little bit. In 1992, when the internet started to become widely available, everyone predicted the death of the public library. Everyone said, you've got Google, we don't need a public library. And it's interesting because public library use peaked during the Great Recession. So, and that was about 10, 15 years. That internet actually drove more people into the library than removed them from it. The other thing I just want to say is, although we're seeing a slight downturn right now, I do not believe it's because of digital books. I believe that libraries tend to be a little counter-cyclical to the economy, so that when the economy is doing well, we're not as busy. And when the economy is doing poorly, people use the library more because they have fewer resources. So I want to talk about a couple things that you see in 21st century libraries. How many of you have been to Scotts Valley? Live Oak? I mean, I think the Santa Cruz Public Library system has begun building these, but I really encourage people to go out to newer libraries because in some ways they're fundamentally different and you'll see fundamentally different use. I went to Los Gatos Library, which is a brand new library, and I was there right as school ended, and I watched at least 300 kids walk into that library. It was just a thing to behold. And it's really hard because I believe that if you don't invest in changing libraries towards modern times, their use goes down dramatically. And if you do invest, their use goes up. But I'm in the position of telling politicians and policymakers, if you build it, they will come, which is a really hard thing to sell to people who have to okay large sums of money. I was thrilled that this community chose to do Measure S because I think you're going to see a renaissance of the public library system, and you're going to be pleased and you're going to be amazed and it's going to be exciting. So the first thing you see when you walk into a library is computers. I've rebuilt or remodeled 7 libraries while I was in Minnesota, and without a doubt, every time I did so, I would get someone who called me and said it's too many computers, it's not attractive. But computer use is really important. I was shocked because I don't know if you've been to Minnesota, but I think of the coast as a more sophisticated place. I think of Silicon Valley, and I assumed that the libraries in California would be super high tech as a result. And I would say in Minnesota, I served the same population size, and I had one library that has more computers than all of the Santa Cruz public libraries. And we ration in Santa Cruz to 1 hour. So if there's nobody there, you can have longer time. But really the idea is we're only going to guarantee you 1 hour of time. And what we're finding is, interestingly, and this has been happening in the last 5 years, is a lot of people have given up their internet at home. They're even giving up their desktop at home, and they're relying on their cell phone. There are things that cell phones can't do. So one of the things you see is college students trying to write a paper on a cell phone, immigrants trying to fill out government forms on a cell phone. Have you ever seen a FAFSA, which is what you need to get financial aid for college? It's just amazing. In Minnesota, and I think an aspect of this is more and more government is going online. I don't know if you remember when Medicare Part B went totally online. They didn't want to use paper anymore. Guess where people came? Public library. In Minnesota, our housing authority decided to open their Section 8 waiting list, and they hadn't done so in 12 years. Okay? So they said, we're only going to do that application online. So this is low-income people who are really struggling to get by, and they didn't tell the libraries they were going to do this. And so they opened it up, and everyone went to the public library because they didn't necessarily know how to fill out the form, how to get to the website. So it's interesting, the single greatest barriers people have, I think, in terms of getting the information they need in this era, is they can't get through that barrier of digital access. We've had librarians where, had this happen to me the other day, our downtown library's water pipe exploded. And I had a woman come to the door. We had to shut the library down. And literally in tears with her flash drive saying, I've got to submit this resume by 5 o'clock, and you're the only place I can accomplish this. And you know, we worked it out so she could go to Brands of 40, but I think people don't realize how much that technology is a really important part of people just getting their lives done. And I think, especially if you come from affluence and privilege, you don't realize how little access people actually have in our community. Great news is the Joint Powers Board for the library just provided a grant for us to replace all our public computer desktops. Our buildings are a little too small. We get into some wrestling over who gets to use the computers. We're also going to have a laptop checkout so people can go sit on the couch and do some computing. And we're going to invest in wireless printing over the summer. We did a quick survey of our computer users. We had 600 people responded 1 month with no prompting. Printing was a huge issue for our community because as people have divested from their home desktops, they don't have printers, so a lot of people come to the library and print, which was interesting to me. Just trying to stay on time. Oh, the other thing I need to say about computers is it's put huge pressure on the hours the building are open. Because we've tried to become a 24/7 library where you can get our digital materials online. But if you're filling out the FAFSA, you need 2 hours to sit in front of a computer and try to do that. And so our really shortened hours has created a lot of stress with our public. We did a survey of the community last fall as part of our strategic planning process. And to a person, the number one things our customers asked for were more hours at the branches. And I'm happy to say, last Friday, June 1st, we've expanded our hours at our public service hours across the 10 branches by 66 hours a week, which is huge. And it's things like we wanted to have some Sunday hours up in the valleys because they would have to come all the way to Santa Cruz if they wanted to go to a library on Sundays. Garfield Park, very popular library, very tiny, didn't have Saturday hours, which, you know, with so many of the adults in our community working full-time, trying to fit in library visits Monday through Friday is just a very difficult thing to do. So I want to say, as much as we're investing in our buildings, we're also investing in our programs and services to ensure that they meet the needs of our community. I wanted to talk about digital resources. I don't know if you know this, we have digital books. Lots of digital books. We have downloadable audiobooks. We have digital magazines. If you love National Geographic, you need to see National Geographic in the digital magazines. Because you know how they have the little subtitles on a photo? Like you go into that, it shows you 10 documents that link to things about the photograph you're seeing. You can see a picture of the photographer. It's just this sort of multi-dimensional experience with digital magazines. We have a lot of databases that people aren't aware of, like Ancestry.com, if you want to do genealogical research. The great thing about a library is we can work together to purchase things that are really expensive that then the community can share. And so I would just, if you haven't been in the library for a while, I'd come see, we do a lot of little pop-ups that show people how to use these digital resources. I encourage you to come and visit us. We have a lot we'd love to show you. I think another way that libraries are changing is this desire for collective spaces. And an interesting trend we're seeing in the library is co-working. This is sort of a result of the recession, but a lot of people have moved from permanent jobs to contracted jobs. It's interesting, we've also seen a lot of students move to online learning for university work. They get lonely. They don't like being home alone all the time. And so one of the things we're really seeing in the library is people who come in and do their work just at a desk in the library. I think it gives them some feeling of camaraderie. As much as our digital collections are growing, our fastest growing service in the library right now is programs, community-led programs. And so we're doing all these partnerships with community groups to have all these sort of learning activities going on in the library. And so for the libraries that don't have that kind of programming space, meeting room kind of space, they're at a huge disadvantage in terms of working with their local community and giving the community things that they want. And so one of the things we're trying to do in the rebuilds is create more programming spaces so that the community can gather, the community can learn together. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is sort of students. You know, we still work with the traditional issues. We know that if kindergartners are not ready for kindergarten, they do not do as well. We know that states actually can predict their prison populations off of the number of kids that don't meet their reading levels in the 3rd grade. It's appalling. And there is so much we can do, but libraries need to work more closely with school districts. We can't be competitors. We need to be working together on these issues. One of the things we've learned is the summer learning losses are huge. So when you look at 2 kids, the low-income kids do really different things with their summers than affluent kids. And by 3rd grade, that makes a huge difference. So I want to say we still have our traditional story times. We have all these literacy activities within the children's areas of the library, and we're working much more closely with the schools to try to make sure that early literacy is a strong message in our communities. With the older kids, we're also doing more shifting from straight reading to learning. I think one of the things you're seeing is the maker movement show up, where it's, you know, it's the John Dewey hands-on learning. A lot of it tends to be tech-based. I think one of the things you're seeing is that STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, integrated into library programming. We have robotics teams. I mean, that's a different space challenge for us. I'm laughing because one of our robotics teams is at Garfield Park, which I don't know where they do it. I've gone to see just because yeah, it takes a lot of space and they don't have a lot of space. And things like 3D printers, or 3D printers. It's interesting, as we've added some of this sort of high-end technology for the teens, the adults are coming and saying, we want a class in 3D printing. So that's been kind of fun too. I'm running out of time, and I just want to say Measure S provides $68 million to develop the infrastructure of all 10 libraries. I'm really excited to say that Capitola and Felton are through their design phase and moving on to the construction document phase. My estimate is that they will both break ground in the spring of next year. Very excited about that. Downtown is starting a community process to look at what should downtown be. I think that's going to take a while because I think there's less consensus about the direction that downtown's going. We have 8 years to spend $68 million and improve all 10 branches. So there's a lot of work to do. Deep breath, but it's exciting. I hope for your continued support. If you haven't been in a while, I hope you'll come back and give us a try. And I hope you'll recommend us to people in the community because we're really excited about where things are going. And I think if they haven't been to the library in a while, people will be a little surprised about some of the changes. Thank you.
I want to share what I use my library for. These are wonderful little gadgets. They're called playaways, and I use them. I read a Steinbeck book on them while I'm walking in the morning, so if you're not aware of them, it's a way to read while you're walking, exercising, or whatever.
And so we can download books to any of your devices, but this is a really nice one because you kind of can't mess it up.
You need a battery.
You need a battery, but I'm still moving away from books on CD to downloadable, and sometimes I mess them up.
So does the library provide that?
You just check it out like a book.
They're playaways. They're called playaways, and there's a whole section of them in the library. Yeah. I go to the Galt Street Library, so that's where. But downtown has many more, I'm sure.
And you can request them. If you go in the catalog, you can say, I want to only look at the playaways, and just check those out.
Yeah.
But you have devices.
Any other questions?
No.
They provide the device?
Yeah.
I don't think they don't provide your.
What?
You just have to
This is what they found.
and the leads are yours.
I know we have it occasionally.
What's the status of the bookmobile? I'm really excited to say we were able to get a brand new bookmobile last summer. So we have a new state-of-art bookmobile. We're really trying to focus the bookmobile services on areas that are underserved. And so primarily what we're looking at, senior high-rises where people are have mobility issues, and then rural areas like in the North County and in the South County where they just don't have physical access.
Yeah, no, you're up in Bonnie Doon.
Yeah, we're up in Bonnie Doon. Ma'am.
Yes. How would I be able to support your vision of what you'd like in downtown Santa Cruz? How could I get involved to support you?
That's a really good question, but I do think the answer is to join the Friends of the Library.
I already am.
Thank you. I think the Friends have had a profound impact on what the libraries are and have raised money to help them be sometimes what government funds can't cover. And to be honest, I have an idea of what I want downtown to be, but I do think I'm not fully set yet. I think the community has to weigh in. I get a lot of issues around homelessness and whether we serve it or restrict access, which legally we can't do. And I think the community has to spend more time talking about the library's role in working on those issues in the community.
But I'm talking about the building, the new building.
Yeah, so the big issue is the parking ramp issue. I don't know if anyone has heard this. I have to say the city's motivation for looking at that is money. In that the $23 million that are allocated to create the downtown library is inadequate. And so what they're really trying to do is find a way to help subsidize the cost of the building so that they can have a bigger and better library. But I don't think they're both, like, you know, I've been unhappy with the news coverage of it because I don't think the city's decided that that's the absolute right thing. And I think their motives in some ways have been questioned. But from my perspective, they're really trying to figure out a way to get the biggest library possible.
So I read the Sentinel, but I don't feel fully informed. And as a member of Friends of the Library, I respond the most enthusiastically to the book sales.
Thank you. That funds a lot of good work.
Yes, but how can I get plugged into
So
the
I think
aspect of the downtown?
the city's just selected a committee, which is of 10 people in the city who are going to start processing these issues, and they've hired an architect to work with them. That meeting, the first meeting is next Wednesday, I think. Is that the 14th? And so I think you can attend those meetings. I think there'll be a series of public input meetings where they ask people to come and talk about their wishes. The idea is that committee would come with a proposal in November to the city council. So, but I think part of it is letting that sort of grassroots thing happen.
Of course.
I'm in a book group,
Yay!
and we're a bit frustrated with the limited number of choices that we have for our reading. Is there going to be more money put into that, or is it all going to be digital?
I have to say, we just got a $300,000 grant from the JPA. We spend about $1 million a year on materials. The JPA just gave us $300,000 to sort of enhance that one time. We are adding book club bags, but the vast majority of the money is going to digital because that's where our big waiting lists are. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to put the book club bags out on the shelves. Right now they're behind, so you can browse them and look through them and say, because there's a lot in the back room.
Well, we just go online and get the whole list, but it's very limited.
I will also bring that feedback back to our technical services director. Thank you.
I have a question. So do you ever worry about, like, with the changing technologies, how fast technology is changing? Do you ever worry that you'll get the library set up for one type of technology only to find that it's out of date by the time it's accomplished? And, you know, how do you try to keep ahead of technology?
You know, did you hear that question, is how do you keep ahead of the technology? Yes, it scares me. But I would say that, and this was true in my other buildings, the big problem that happened is the libraries that were built in the late 80s, and then the internet happened and they weren't wired. That was a dramatic and expensive change to make, and you can see, because our libraries are older than that, you know, the wires coming down and these weird poles, all of that is a result of not having wired buildings. I think what we're doing, and some people don't like this, but as you look at the library, what we're trying to do is sort of square shells that have internal pieces that are flexible. So that rather than building full walls, you'll see glass panels to create a room so that they can be rearranged rather than, and so then the electrical and the data are all on the outside walls. The other thing, like we're doing in Capitola, is we're going to run the HVAC system and the electrical and data system underneath, because it's easier to rearrange that from the bottom than from the top. So what we're trying to do is a form of architecture that creates more flexibility for change.
Has there been public input on the Capitola Library, the design? Because I noticed there was like an artist rendering we had on our voter, front page of the voter. So I was just wondering, has there been public input on that?
With all our libraries, we go out and do a whole series of public input conversations. And, you know, with Felton, it's been going on 20 years, and I kind of feel sorry for that community. It's been going on so long. But we'll do an interior process this summer. This spring, we had a heavy process because we were really designing the physical facility in Capitola this spring. And I think we had 3 public meetings plus city council and planning meetings. So there is quite a bit of public input. I don't want to take over your agenda. I know you have a lot to do. I'm going to stick around if you have any questions. I'm so appreciative of the opportunity to speak to you. And thank you very much.
Thank you.